You know what hurts more than losing a drag race in your 5.0 Mustang? Getting gapped by a 4-cylinder import that's older than your dad's jean jacket. Yep, Japanese cars have been flipping the script on American muscle for decades. They don't just go fast, they do it with less weight, better balance, and a whole lot of engineering black magic. Today we're diving into 9 Japanese cars that didn't just compete with American muscle, they absolutely destroyed it. And wait till you hear about the one that literally forced Detroit to change everything it was doing. That car? It's coming up soon. But we must first talk about the Datsun 240Z. This car came out in 1969, back when the Mustang and Camaro were busy stuffing giant engines into giant bodies and calling it performance. Meanwhile, the 240Z was light, nimble, and actually designed to go around corners. It had a straight 6 that only made around 150 horsepower. But because the car weighed less than 2,400 pounds, it could absolutely hang with the big boys in real-world driving. And when the road got twisty, the Datsun didn't just hang, it danced. It was affordable, reliable, and had a look that made people do a double take. Unlike the muscle cars of the time, it didn't need raw power to be exciting, it relied on precision. It opened America's eyes to the idea that performance wasn't just about big cubes and loud pipes. It was about balance, it was about handling, and it was about time. Speaking of handling, we simply must talk about the Mazda RX7 FD3S. This thing was a problem for American V8s. Rotary engine, twin turbos, featherweight chassis. It didn't look like anything else. It didn't sound like anything else. And it didn't drive like anything else either. While muscle cars were still trying to outbench press each other, the RX-7 was slicing through corners like a scalpel. And here's the twist. It only made 276 horsepower. But that was more than enough, because Mazda kept the weight down and focused on chassis tuning. It was one of the few cars from the 90s that could embarrass a Corvette on the track, while also turning heads in the parking lot. It was low, sleek, and balanced like a gymnast. The rotary engine wasn't just unique, it was a statement. And every time you heard the turbo spool followed by that iconic sound, you knew something wicked was coming. Now, if you've ever watched a Fast and Furious movie, you probably know what's next. And if you don't, buckle up, literally. The Toyota Supra MK4. Twin turbo, inline 6, bulletproof engine. On paper, it made about 320 horsepower, but that wasn't the whole story. This car was so overbuilt that tuners quickly figured out it could handle 800, 900, even 1,000 horsepower on stock internals, and they ran with it. Meanwhile, over in America, you had cars like the Camaro Z28 or the Mustang Cobra trying to keep up on maybe 300 to 350 horsepower, if you were lucky. By the time the muscle cars figured out what hit them, the Supra was halfway down the highway doing a 60 to 130 pull. This car didn't just destroy muscle at the time. It redefined what car guys thought was possible from a tuner. It became a symbol of speed, and best of all, it gave everyday drivers a taste of sports car magic without draining their wallets, of reliability, and of what happens when engineers get a little too carried away. Drag strip, highway, roll race, it didn't matter, and to this day, it's the car most V8 guys secretly don't want to line up next to. But way back before the Toyota Supra, there was a car that definitely deserves way more respect than it gets. The Toyota 2000 GT. Only around 350 were ever made. But in the late 1960s, this thing punched directly at the nose of the Corvette Stingray. 2.0-liter straight 6, Yamaha-tuned engine, and one of the most gorgeous profiles of any car ever. It was quick, but not ridiculously fast. Still, in terms of refinement, balance, and innovation, it walked all over what most American companies were making at the time. And when it got featured in a James Bond movie, that was the cherry on top. Japan had officially arrived. You want to talk about actual dominance, though? Then we gotta mention the Nissan GTR R32, aka Godzilla. This car made American engineers nervous. It had all-wheel drive, it had four-wheel steering, It had a turbocharged inline-six that made 280 horsepower officially. Unofficially, it made way more. It was banned from Group A racing because it just kept winning. And when tuners got their hands on it, forget it. It could eat Corvettes and Mustangs for breakfast, and it did it with Japanese precision and anime villain energy. Now, before I tell you more, I want to quickly ask you to race to that subscribe button. 99.9% of you aren't subscribed, and I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers this year. There's a reason the R32 GTR became legendary worldwide. It didn't just beat muscle cars, it outclassed them. And right behind it came the Evolution, the Nissan GTR R35. This was the car that truly shocked America. Because when it landed in 2008, it showed up with launch control, twin turbos, a dual-clutch transmission, and zero respect for the competition. Corvettes, Vipers, Shelby Mustangs, all of them got gapped. Even the most hardcore muscle cars had trouble keeping up, especially from a dig, because the R35 would just hook and go. It was a muscle car killer, engineered in a lab. Sure, it was heavy. Sure, it didn't have a manual. But the thing performed like a hypercar for half the price, and tuners quickly figured out how to crank it into a 1,000 horsepower monster. Muscle? Meat machine. But here's where things get even more savage. The Acura NSX. This was Japan's answer to Ferrari. But it also gave American muscle a wake-up call they weren't ready for. It had a mid-mounted V6, titanium connecting rods, and a chassis co-developed by Ayrton Senna. It wasn't the fastest in a straight line, but it was so refined, so easy to drive at the limit, and so far ahead in design that it made muscle cars look like tractor trailers. It also humiliated exotic cars that cost 3 times more. But back home in the US, it showed people that you didn't need a V8 to have a world-class performance machine. The NSX didn't bark, it whispered. And it still made the ground shake. It was aluminum, futuristic, and surgical, while muscle cars were still all steel and brute force. It didn't need noise to be respected. It earned it through control, precision, and a driving feel that muscle just couldn't match. Even seasoned drivers admitted this thing changed how cars should feel. Let's shift gears real quick, because this next one, let's just say, a nightmare for muscle on the street. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. These cars were nightmares for muscle on the street. Turbocharged 4-cylinder, all-wheel drive, rally DNA. They were compact, aggressive, and thanks to turbo lag and boost dumps, they sounded like they were straight out of an arcade game. On a twisty road, they demolished Camaros and Mustangs. And off the line, thanks to AWD, they'd leave rear-wheel drive muscle spinning in place while they launched to 60 in just under 5 seconds. These weren't drag monsters. They were surgical weapons made for corners, elevation, and chaos. And the thing that made it all worse for American gearheads? These Evos looked like basic economy sedans to the untrained eye. A true wolf in sheep's clothing. And now, the car that may have done more damage to muscle than any other, the Honda Civic Type R. Yeah, laugh all you want. But this little hatchback with a naturally aspirated 1.6-liter engine and front-wheel drive did something most muscle cars couldn't. It took corners like it was on rails. It had no power, just 185 horsepower. But it was light, it was balanced, and the engine revved to 8,400 revolutions per minute. You couldn't catch it in the twisties. And when modded, these Civics could be absolute demons. Drag-ready builds pushing 600 horsepower out of tiny 4-bangers. Track builds that could outlap cars with twice the engine size. It wasn't about horsepower. It was about efficiency. The Civic Type R wasn't just a commuter car turned hot hatch. It was proof that Japanese engineering could take on Detroit's finest with half the displacement and twice the reliability. But staying in Asia, China has been dropping cars that are completely destroying Western competition. SUVs, hypercars, EVs, even minivans. I made a full video on how China is challenging every single type of vehicle and how they are probably winning. Click on screen to watch now, and I will see you in the next one.